John's consequential mindset. Philosophy for success. Author, Jonathan Chacorn. All rights reserved. Chapter 0. Introduction. Join us on the path to real change. Immerse yourself in John's consequential mindset and let each page inspire you to take control of your destiny. This book is a true story of self-improvement, where the author narrates his evolution and personal growth through what he terms a common distortion of reality. All this changed one long, cold night in September when, feeling overwhelmed by circumstances beyond his control, he began to reflect on his life. This moment of introspection marked a definitive turning point that would forever alter his perspective. In this book, you will discover a remarkable journey of transformation. This is not a work of fiction, but a profound testament to the power of adopting a consequential mindset, acknowledging and accepting the outcomes of our actions and inactions. John's consequential mindset is a path of discovery towards an authentic life, establishing a direct and unbreakable link between our actions and their consequences, and refining our reality by filtering out uncontrollable external factors. It emphasizes focusing our attention and energy on what we can always control, the power to take action and steer our own lives. As you turn the pages, you will witness a personal odyssey that goes beyond the ordinary. Through the lens of this powerful mindset, the author confronted and overcame various common adversities of everyday life, bolstered his personal development, and pursued entrepreneurial success. This narrative offers more than just an entertaining and heartfelt story. It serves as a beacon for those eager to break free from their comfort zones, embrace the unknown, and take deliberate actions toward their dreams. John's consequential mindset is not only inspiring, it's a blueprint for transformation and a compelling testament to the extraordinary outcomes awaiting those who dare to live life fully aware of the consequences of their actions and omissions. Join us on this transformative journey and discover the limitless power of living with intention, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to the consequences of our actions and omissions. Chapter 1. The Memory of John's Childhood. In the stillness of the night, introspection leads us to the true consequence, the starting point towards authenticity and personal growth. Tonight, on this quiet Sunday in September 2015, I sit alone amidst the stillness of my modest apartment, an accomplishment born of both effort and perseverance. At only 25, the complexities I face at such a young age are overwhelming. In my right hand, I hold a glass of wine. As time slowly passes, my thoughts drift back to the brief yet profound conversation I had with my father earlier today. This must mark a turning point in my current situation, I whisper to myself. It has been a month since I last engaged in my favorite sport. My coach, who unknowingly became my first mentor, often echoed a phrase that haunts me tonight: be consequential, John. He has called me twice this week, likely to inquire about my absence from training, a question I've yet to answer. Why? Quite simply, I lack the motivation to continue. 2 weeks ago, my relationship ended, and I've heard nothing from my ex-partner since. Meanwhile, my job situation is in free fall, leaving me feeling utterly lost. Time just passes, and at this point, glass by glass, I start to rethink my whole life. I begin by recalling the cherished memories of my childhood. My name is John, and I hail from Junín, a quaint town in the province of Buenos Aires, Argentina. Reflecting on my upbringing, the most vivid memories are those of growing up as an only child in a nurturing and secure family environment fostered by my loving parents. The 1990s marked my early years, a time blissfully untouched by the now ubiquitous screens, cell phones, video games, and technology. For an active and talkative child like myself, entertainment meant engaging with the great outdoors. My friends, neighbors, and I would run through fields, climb trees, explore the local river and parks, and a game of football in my backyard was always on the agenda. Occasionally, we'd find ourselves embroiled in harmless mischief. It was an era when imagination and creativity thrived, and fun seemed boundless. Among my family, I must highlight my cousin Eric. Being the same age and neighbors, he was naturally my inaugural companion. Eric frequently visited my home to play, and together we formed a tightly knit circle with other local children. This period also introduced me to my initial academic challenges. As I previously noted, my energetic and sociable nature often came with a dose of distraction, which meant that my academic performance was far from stellar. There were subjects I struggled with, notably English under the stringent demands of Professor Robert. God, how exacting he was. Nevertheless, through perseverance and dedicated effort over the years, I managed to overcome these hurdles. I didn't excel academically, but importantly, I completed each school year, learning early on the value of persistence and the consequences of my actions and focus, or occasionally, the lack thereof. My cousin and friend, Eric, became increasingly absent from our gatherings in my backyard. Meanwhile, he attended a different school where he excelled academically, finishing the school year with outstanding grades. He was consistently honored as the top student and was the flag bearer at all patriotic ceremonies. His parents, brimming with pride at every family gathering, often spoke of the bright future awaiting Eric thanks to his academic prowess. Eric has a real knack for studying, he's gifted, my aunt would proudly proclaim at every opportunity. This left me pondering my own prospects. At family gatherings, my parents would come to my defense, often painting a rosier picture of my academic struggles. They blamed my underperformance on overly strict teachers or bad luck, reassuring me with, "Don't worry, son, you were just unlucky. Next time will be better." Despite their words, I could see the disappointment hidden behind their assurances, a regret I still carry with me as an adult. Returning to that evening in September 2015, as my reminiscences deepened, I realized my wine was finished. I rummaged for something stronger and found an old bottle of whiskey my father had given me, a bottle I never thought I'd open. I'm not much of a drinker, but that night, feeling like I had hit rock bottom, I just needed something. Pouring the whiskey over ice, I settled onto the sofa. As I sipped, the phrase, "Be consequential, John," echoed in my mind. Had I truly been consequential in my childhood? What does it mean to be consequential? To be consequential is to fully embrace the outcomes of our actions, inactions, and decisions, both positive and negative. It involves aligning your actions and words meticulously, without resorting to excuses or justifications, and acting in harmony with your values, beliefs, and principles. Being consequential in one's actions is a hallmark of integrity and self-honesty. It means recognizing that every choice we make is significant and that each decision leads to results for which we must take full responsibility. Why did I receive such poor grades when faced with my initial challenges in school? Was it really Professor Robert's fault? I ponder these questions. My mother would often say, "Of course, he was a very demanding teacher." For a long time, I believed her. But now, as I reflect, I begin to question, was that truly the case? Shouldn't a teacher be demanding? Should a subject be easy for one to earn good grades? Was I merely unlucky during that assessment? Perhaps in those initial failures, I was not truly accountable for my actions. I've come to realize that in my youth, my first shortcomings were often excused and evaded, blaming external factors like the difficulty of Robert's English class. Indeed, he was very demanding, but when I finally committed to studying and put effort into the subject, I passed. I conclude that the real issue with my consistency was not with my English teacher, rather, it was my failure to take responsibility for both my actions and inactions. To be truly consequential means recognizing what you've done well to achieve a goal and understanding what you failed to do, which led to adverse outcomes. Does a consequential person find external culprits for personal failures? While a consequential person may recognize the myriad external factors, economic, political, social, and technological, that can influence outcomes, they primarily focus on their own responsibilities. Instead of resorting to excuses or casting blame elsewhere, such a person meticulously examines their own actions and decisions. This introspection helps them understand what lessons can be learned and what adjustments need to be made for future improvement. This mindset fosters a robust attitude of self-reflection and self-awareness, which are crucial aspects of living consequentially. These traits not only enhance resilience but also empower the individual to navigate and surmount obstacles more effectively. Chapter 2. John finds his sport and in it. His first mentor. You can lie to people, even to yourself, but you can't lie to reality because it's always going to mark you with a consequence, an indisputable truth. I keep remembering and I can't omit to mention how I got to know my favorite sport. I was always a very active child, so my parents recommended me to do some sport to channel that concern. They in their youth also practiced sports and believed that it was a perfect way to relate, accept new challenges, adopt values that sport has to offer, and indeed it was. Since I was a child, I had tried several sports, such as football and basketball, but although I enjoyed them, I never found in them to feel really motivated. They never completely fulfilled me, so always for one reason or another I ended up giving up. One day, after school when I was 13 years old, I returned home with my mother, and on the way I saw a small boxing gym. My mother, who sees me intrigued, looked at me and said, "Don't even think about it, boxing is a sport for the violent." My mother said sharply. I just look and don't answer. Then when I got home, I greeted my father and watched football on TV with him. After a while, I couldn't take it anymore and commented, "Father, have you seen the new boxing gym that opened in the city?" Of course, John, do you know who opened it? Carlos. The former world champions. My God, how broke he will be to end up opening a small gym in this small town. He made millions in his last fights and here he is, 10 years later renting a small warehouse in our city. It's a shame. My father replied, "Why are you mentioning it to me? Would you like to start boxing?" I don't know, father. It's a very violent sport and I have too many fears for a sport like this. My mother doesn't like me boxing either. Answer doubtfully. I don't think that's the case. The fact that you do boxing as a sport doesn't mean that you have to get hit with punches. Surely it can be done recreationally. If you would like to start boxing, you have my support. Sure. Perfect, I'll go back and forth, but you convince Mom because she won't like it. Son, you're going to be the one who starts boxing, and the one who's going to take the blows is going to be me. Your mother is going to kill me. We laughed non-stop and he promised to take me to the gym next week. My first day arrived. I was a little nervous, as I would never have imagined practicing a sport like boxing before. However, when I arrived at the gym, my father introduced me to Carlos. He welcomed me and I started training, clarifying that it would be like a recreational sport, and so it was. Time went by, but I think from the first moment I started training I knew I had found my favorite sport. Boxing allowed me to channel all my energy, my determination. It made me feel strong and self-confident. In addition to finding my favorite sport, I also found in my coach my first mentor in life, Carlos. He had an incredible story. He grew up being a very humble child. From a young age he had always loved boxing. His dedication and passion for this sport led him to become a world champion, fighting epic fights and becoming known all over the world. Carlos achieved the success of reaching the top of world sport and achieving fame, along with a fortune that overwhelmed him, but over time, fame blinded him. He did not let him see his irresponsibility, until the mismanagement and waste of his money led him to bankruptcy. Carlos had hit rock bottom and some addictions came to light. However, one afternoon after training he confesses to me that one day when I hit rock bottom I reflect, I take dimension of the real consequences that his irresponsibilities had had in his life. He mentions to me that all the effort and sacrifice that led him to be number one in the world, he left it on the road, gave himself over to addictions and the waste of money, leaving it on the canvas, as if it were a knockout. That's where he decided to start over. With the little money he had left, he opened this small boxing gym, and that's where it all started. Then as the years went by, reaching my 19 years, I realized that only training recreationally made me feel empty in terms of goals, and it began to be born in me, wanting to start preparing to compete and prove myself, although I quickly had doubts, because, although I felt confident in my training and what I learned, I couldn't help but think about the talent factor. What if I don't have talent? I had recently finished school without standing out in the course, and I had been pigeonholed with the feeling that it was because I did not have that talent that my cousin Eric did have to study. Finally, I stopped overthinking so much. I ignored the talent factor that made me so much noise, and that same afternoon I spoke with Carlos. He, after listening to me, tells me that several competition events are coming soon, but that before going to compete in one, I have to prepare well first and be ready, since recreational boxing training is very different with respect to training to compete. The following week my training begins. In the afternoons I trained boxing, but quickly Carlos tells me that I had to do another training shift to go running, and I had to do it on my own, at another time. This was necessary to acquire a fundamental aerobic endurance, but there was a problem. At 8 in the morning I started my working day in my first job, so my only free time option was to go for a run on my own very early, before starting my workday. Time passed, my boxing workouts got better and better, but, on the other hand, my runs on my own in the mornings were somewhat isolated. Time passed and I felt ready, until one day the opportunity finally came. John, you already have a confirmed opponent and event for your first competition. Carla said that afternoon. Finally, the night came. It was time to prove myself. That night, we were 3 amateur boxers representing Carla's gym. When I arrived at the place, it was incredible how that night, the evening that was held in a neighboring city called Pergamino, received Carlos with applause. It couldn't be for less. He was a world boxing champion. Everything indicated that it must be an unforgettable night, but my moment quickly came. Full of nerves, I hear my name and I get in the ring. I face the challenge. In amateur boxing you start with fights of only 3 rounds, but whoever got into a ring knows how eternal the time of each one becomes. First round, the fight begins, people screaming, your opponent in front, nerves mix with anxiety, and for a few seconds the feeling is of having clouded vision, a feeling of not understanding what is happening, that is, only until the first punch is thrown, then the nerves disappear and the adrenaline shoots, taking over your body. The game begins. Some think that the one who hits the hardest wins. I believe that the art of boxing is in hitting without being hit, and that is where my game begins. My leg and waist movements lead my opponent to despair, to throw punches that do not reach their destination. While frustration causes them to neglect their defense, I take the opportunity to counterpunch, impacting with precision. People explode with each accurate blow, while the round seems eternal, until reaching the end. A minute of rest, my coach Carlos just told me. Keep it up, John. Second round. The second round begins. My opponent comes out more aggressive, but I continue with the movements of my legs. But there comes a time when they don't give any more. What used to be lateral steps begin to be steps backwards. My opponent knows that it is his time to press, not to let me think, and indeed he succeeds. He shortens the spaces, and I am cornered. I try to counterattack with little success. The final seconds arrive, and what was a ballet, with my lateral movements and counterattacks, becomes a war. Cornered. The round finishes, and this time my opponent finishes it better. A minute of rest, Carlos lost his cool and madly kept repeating to me, a move. Counter and move. Third round. The last round begins. I get out and start to move and counter. In fact, each round is eternal. I am short of breath. My opponent is approaching, and once again I am left cornered. What was an evasion and counterattack strategy turned back into a give me and take. The strategy is forgotten, because when tiredness arrives, there is only the internal fire left for not giving up. Final minute, my opponent also gets tired, and we both lose neatness. People explode, and the fight reaches its final 10 seconds. I hit a jab and get out. When I finally hear the final bell, the winner is The referee of the fight approaches, takes a hand to both of us, but only one is going to raise it, but not before telling us. Guys, they put up a really good fight. Finally, he raises my opponent's hand. My disappointment was total. I started winning the fight comfortably, but by points in the second and third round I ended up losing it. I'm sorry I disappointed Carlos. He was world champion and here I am, losing my first fight, and with this his time as well. The boxing evening ends. I feel collapsed. My parents, who suffered the fight more than me, come up to me and my mother tells me, "I heard that your opponent already had 3 fights, while for you it was the first. How unfair, how bad luck that you get right with this guy." Heartbroken, I just listened to her. My other 2 teammates won their fights. That makes me the only loser, the only one who let Carlos down. "Don't worry, John. On Monday we talked. You put up a good fight. I congratulate you," Carlos said without anything else to add. When I return home, tired, I go to bed with 1,000 thoughts in my head. Wasn't I lucky? Does this confirm that I have no talent? Am I a disappointment to my coach? They were questions that constantly swirled in my thoughts. The following Monday afternoon, I arrived at the gym early, looking to talk to Carlos, who surely noticed my low mood, looks at me and asks, "John, what do you think happened?" Surely, I don't have a talent for boxing, or maybe I was unlucky because I had an opponent with more experience than me. I respond disappointedly. Bad luck? Lack of talent? Excuses are futile. Be consequential, John. Tell me the truth, did you go for your morning runs as I instructed? I emphasized how crucial they were for your aerobic conditioning. What was it that you lacked? John, listen, don't answer now. You can make excuses, lie to me, even lie to yourself, but you can't deceive the ring. You know why? Because in the moment of truth, no matter how much you think about talent, luck, or any other excuse you conjure, reality delivers a consequence. You didn't run as you should have. In the first round, you taught that guy a lesson in boxing, even though he was more experienced, but he didn't beat you because of that. He beat you because he truly committed to himself. Whether or not you skip those runs might be unknown to me, but I assure you, the consequence will manifest. Remember this, be consequential, John. Carlos said. Don't worry, John, forget the word talent. Shall I tell you something? I lost my first 3 amateur fights. I remember that my boxing partners who already had their first amateur fights won joked with me. They told me, "He's Carlos. You're bad. I think it's time to do something else." Don't worry, I won't have talent, but if I'm so bad and keep going, I'll be good one day. That was my immediate response. Indeed, that's how it was. Time proved me right. Since I was a child I loved boxing, and I was not going to allow that not having talent to prohibit me from fulfilling my dreams. In my life I was a fighter. I always insisted. I kept going. I consider that having discipline and sacrifice was what led me to be world champion, while my teammates who did have talent did not even make their debut as professionals. They only fell by the wayside amateurs. Talent undoubtedly exists and is an important factor, but without discipline and sacrifice no goal is achieved. There are people all over the world succeeding without talent, in all areas, both sports and professional workers, because talent can be lacking if you have discipline, but if you have talent, you cannot lack discipline, because talent is never enough. How does a consequential person view the talent factor in terms of success? A consequential person may acknowledge talent as a significant component of success, but they understand that success is shaped by a multitude of factors: hard work, perseverance, resilience, collaboration, and strategic planning. Moreover, a consequential person likely believes that success transcends individual talent alone. It involves a comprehensive approach where personal responsibility and the commitment to overcome challenges play crucial roles. This mindset emphasizes that while talent is beneficial, it must be coupled with consistent effort and a proactive stance towards achieving goals. Today, a Sunday in September 2015, I remember listening intently to Carlos without any rebuttals, his words "be consequential," John echoing in my mind. At that moment, I didn't fully grasp what he meant. I was unfamiliar with what it truly meant to be consequential. However, I did understand one critical thing: I lost the fight due to my failure to run as needed for the aerobic demands of the bout, which was indeed the component I lacked. I also realized that by skipping the runs and making excuses for my irresponsibility, I was not only lying to my coach, but deceiving myself as well. Being consequential means being authentic. To be consequential involves steadfastness in your actions, thoughts, and words, consistently aligning with your values and principles regardless of external circumstances or the opinions of others. It means being sincere and forthright, fully owning the responsibility for your actions and their impacts. This commitment to authenticity not only defines your character but also shapes the outcomes of your life's journey. Faced with the consequence of losing the fight, I looked for excuses such as bad luck or not having talent. Why? For not taking responsibility for my actions, concluding that the omission to go running as I should, my lack of sacrifice and discipline marked my negative result that night. A consequential person and his vision of excuses. People who are consequential about their acts and omissions see excuses as a way to evade responsibility by avoiding assuming the consequences of their actions. They think that excuses are an obstacle to progress and success, and they prefer to face challenges and be aware of their mistakes in order to grow and improve. I also pondered Carlos' insights on talent. His story left me astounded. How could someone who became number one in the world believe they had no talent? I had always thought such a thing impossible. This reflection led me to realize that during and after my school years, I felt I lacked the natural ability to study, unlike my cousin Eric, who seemed to excel effortlessly. I found myself trapped in the mindset of "I can't," believing I didn't have the talent to succeed academically. At the end of the school year, most young people face two choices: pursue a university degree or start working. And what did I do? I told myself, I can't handle a university-level course. I limited myself by attributing my academic challenges to a lack of innate ability rather than acknowledging they were due to my lack of discipline and dedication. Instead of taking responsibility, I made excuses to avoid facing my shortcomings. I also questioned whether Eric truly had a natural talent for studying. Did he possess an innate knack, or was it something else? While I may not have the answer, I do know that Eric gradually started missing our gatherings in the backyard, despite living just next door. He became increasingly absent from our meetings, distancing himself from our group of friends. This was because he was responsible and disciplined with the school, so he chose to stay at home to study, discipline, and sacrifice that I did not have. Because of all this, I think about the end of my school year and how I decided to solve the subsequent dilemma of every young person. Where do you start to build a future? What can I be good at? Am I not? Chapter 3. John's first work.